The book club wasn't mine. I'd just been invited along because my cousin couldn't make it, and the seat would have stayed empty otherwise. It was one of those little Thursday evening gatherings above the used bookstore downtown, soft lamps, chipped mugs, chairs too close together. The kind of room where you hear the smallest shifts, someone stirring sugar, someone breathing out through their nose. I sat near the window. Across from me were three women, mid-40s, maybe a little older, all friends, or at least familiar enough to know how each one laughed. They weren't trying to hide the way they looked at me. Not in an obvious, reckless way, but in the half-second glances between words, the way a question seemed to bend toward me instead of the group. I noticed, though I pretended not to. One of them kept fiddling with her scarf. Another was underlining words in the book we were supposed to be discussing, as though it gave her hands something to do. But the one I kept coming back to, the one who seemed to keep coming back to me, was Lena. She was quieter than the others. She didn't underline, didn't fill silences with quick remarks. She just leaned back slightly, letting the conversation pass, her thumb resting on the spine of the book, not moving. And whenever I spoke, rarely, just enough to not seem rude, her eyes stayed on me long enough for me to notice. Long enough for me to feel the heat of it. "First time at a club like this?" one of them asked me during a pause. "Yeah," I said, scratching the edge of the table. "Usually I just read on my own. Don't say much about it out loud." Lena smiled then, not at the joke, but at the honesty. Her smile wasn't wide, more like she'd found something she didn't expect. The night went on. They talked about the ending of the book. I didn't say much. My coffee cooled. The clock ticked louder near the end. I kept tracing the rim of my mug with my finger, round and round, as though it mattered. And when everyone finally stood, coats pulled tight, chairs scraped back, Lena lingered near me. She picked up her bag slowly, adjusting the strap like she had more to say. "You live nearby?" she asked, casual, eyes fixed on the scarf she was folding into her coat pocket. "Couple blocks," I said. "Walk here most nights anyway." "Habit." She nodded, still folding, slower than she needed to. "That's nice. Walking." The others called her name, already heading down the stairs. She gave me a small wave, half distracted, and followed them out. I stayed in the empty room for a while, looking at the chairs pushed in, the mugs left behind with half-inch coffee rings. My phone buzzed. I thought it would be my cousin asking how it went. But it wasn't. The message was simple, no name attached, just a number I didn't recognize. "You seemed quieter than the others." "I like that." "Same time next week?" I stared at it, thumb hovering, the echo of her folded scarf still caught in my head. The following week I almost didn't go. The message still sat on my phone, unread and read again, like a small stone in my pocket I couldn't decide whether to throw or keep. I told myself it was just a book club, nothing more. But when I walked into that narrow upstairs room again, Lena was already there, adjusting her chair, a thermos at her feet. She glanced up when I came in. Not surprised. Almost like she had been waiting. "Coffee's stronger here than it looks," she said, nudging her own cup toward me. "I bring tea. Easier on the nerves." Her voice was light, but the way she offered the thermos across the table, it felt like more than politeness. I poured a little into my cup. Chamomile. Calmer. The group talked, but it blurred. I found myself watching her thumb trace the rim of her mug, the way she tilted her head when she listened. When she finally spoke to the group, her voice was softer than theirs, and somehow I leaned in without meaning to. During a lull, she asked me quietly, "You in school?" "Yeah," I said. "Just finishing up. Not sure what comes next." She nodded. "It's strange, that age. All doors open, but you don't know which ones you want." Her eyes stayed on mine a little longer than the question needed. Something flickered there, recognition, maybe. Or warning. Later, as the others argued about the book's ending, she leaned closer, just enough for me to catch her words. "I used to come here with my husband. Years ago." I didn't answer right away. She didn't seem to expect me to. She stirred her tea instead, eyes fixed on the small whirlpool. He didn't like it much. Said I talked too much about books. A faint smile, but it faded quickly. I wanted to ask what happened, but the room was too full, the air too thin. I pressed my finger into the lip of my cup instead, letting the silence carry. The risk of it hit me then. She was twice my age, maybe more. Divorced. Living a life I could only guess at. And yet, when she shifted in her chair, her shoulder brushing mine for the briefest second, it felt less like accident, more like an opening neither of us knew how to close. When the club finally ended, we walked out together. Rain had started, a soft drizzle that blurred the streetlights. She paused under the awning, pulling her coat tighter. You walk, don't you? She asked. Yeah. She hesitated, then shook her head, half smiling. You'll get soaked. I shrugged. Doesn't bother me. Something in her face softened. She reached out, not much, just her hand on my sleeve, brushing away a drop of water that wasn't really there. Quick, almost nothing. But it stayed with me. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next Thursday, I arrived earlier than usual. The bookstore was nearly empty, just the hum of the old radiator and the smell of paper that had been handled too many times. Lena was already there. She was leaning against the window, flipping through a book that wasn't the week's choice. When she saw me, she shut it quickly, like it didn't matter. You're early, she said. So are you. We smiled, but neither of us looked away right away. For a while, it felt different, closer, like the air had thinned around us. She poured tea into my cup without asking. Our chairs were angled just slightly toward each other. It should have been nothing. It wasn't. But halfway through the discussion, one of the other women, Marta, looked between us, her brow raised, the corner of her mouth twitching like she was about to say something. She didn't. She just kept glancing. And every time, I felt the space between Lena and me shrink and harden, as if exposed. Lena must have felt it too, because she shifted back in her chair. She crossed her arms. She didn't meet my eyes when she spoke. You didn't say much tonight, she said finally, when the group thinned out. Didn't have much to say? She gave a small nod, eyes fixed on her bag strap as she adjusted it over her shoulder. Something had pulled her back, whether Marta's look or her own thoughts, I couldn't tell. On the stairs down, we walked side by side, too close for strangers, too careful for anything else. She slowed near the door, hand resting on the frame. Maybe you shouldn't come every week, she said, almost too softly to hear. My chest tightened. Do you want me not to? Her eyes flicked to mine, then away fast. It's not about wanting. A pause. It just complicates things. We stood in silence. People passed us on the sidewalk, umbrellas dripping, voices carrying. The world kept moving, but the doorway felt suspended, as if we were standing on the edge of something neither of us could name. She started to step away, but stopped. Her hand brushed mine, not firm, not even deliberate, more like a ghost of contact. I didn't pull back. Neither did she. For a breath, it was all there. The rain outside, the hum in my chest, her gaze finally lifting to meet mine. A near confession hovered in the space between us. Then someone pushed through the door behind us, laughing too loud, shaking off their coat. The spell broke. Lena pulled her hand back quickly, turning toward the rain. See you next week, she said, voice steady but her eyes not. I watched her walk into the blur of wet pavement, the words I almost said still caught in my throat. The rain had stopped by the time we left the shop that night. The street smelled of wet concrete and faint smoke from a chimney somewhere down the block. Lena walked beside me, her steps slower than usual, her bag straps slipping off her shoulder every few minutes. I offered to carry it. She shook her head. We ended up at the small park near my place. The benches were slick but mostly dry under the trees. She sat, smoothing her coat beneath her, looking at the ground instead of me. I stayed standing for a moment before finally lowering myself beside her. It's quiet here, I said, more to break the silence than anything else. Too quiet sometimes, she answered, folding her hands in her lap. For a long moment neither of us spoke. I watched the way her fingers overlapped, the small twitch of her thumb, restless. I wanted to ask what she was thinking, but I already knew. I shouldn't, she began, then stopped, pressing her lips together. I waited. I shouldn't be sitting here with you like this. Her voice was steady, but her eyes darted away, toward the street lamps flickering at the park's edge. Why? I asked quietly. Because it feels like something it shouldn't. The words landed heavier than she meant them to. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders lifting, then falling. I've spent years trying not to want anything I couldn't have. She went on, softer now. And then you sit there at that table, quiet, listening, not asking for anything. And suddenly She broke off, shaking her head. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the wet gravel. My chest tightened in a way that wasn't unpleasant, just sharp. You make it sound like that's my fault. She turned to me then, really looking, her face caught between a smile and something closer to pain. Maybe it is. The air between us thickened. I could hear her breathing, steady but uneven, like she was holding something back. My hand shifted on the bench, close enough that if either of us moved just slightly, we'd touch. Do you know how many times I told myself not to text you? She said suddenly. Not to sit near you. Not to notice you at all. And yet, I said. And yet, she echoed. Her laugh was quiet, almost bitter. The silence after stretched too long. My throat ached with words I couldn't get out, and I thought I saw the same fight in her, every hesitation, every half-swallowed truth. Her hand flexed in her lap. Mine twitched on the bench. We both looked at each other at the same time, and for a fraction of a second it felt like gravity itself tilted, pulling us closer. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "What would happen if we didn't stop here?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The next week, I walked up the bookstore stairs and saw the difference before I even reached the door. Her chair, second from the end, the one she always claimed, was empty. I sat anyway, the group buzzing around me, talking about plot twists and metaphors. My eyes kept drifting to the vacant seat, waiting for the scrape of the door. Her coat shrugged off, that faint smile like she'd been listening all along. But it never came. Marta noticed. "Lena's out tonight," she said casually. "Family thing, I think." Family thing. The words felt vague, too neat, like a cover laid flat. I nodded, said nothing, and traced the edge of my cup with my thumb until it turned cold. I tried not to imagine. Tried not to picture her in a house I'd never seen, maybe sitting with someone else, an old friend, an ex, a child home for the weekend. But the images came anyway, uninvited, sharp around the edges. Afterward, I walked home slower than usual. Every step felt heavier, like the air itself resisted me. I pulled out my phone once I reached my apartment, thumb hovering over her name in my contacts. I'd typed it in the night of that first message, never daring to label it. Just a number. Just a chance. I wrote, "Didn't see you tonight. Everything okay?" And then I erased it. Wrote it again. Deleted again. The screen glowed back at me, waiting. But I never sent it. The following Thursday, she was there. Already seated, scarf wrapped a little tighter, eyes not meeting mine. She laughed at the group's jokes, spoke when spoken to, but her chair angled subtly away from mine, like a door half closed. When the others filed out, I hesitated, then lingered behind. She was packing her bag slower than she needed to, as if waiting, but when I opened my mouth, she cut me off. "My son's back in town," she said, tone light but clipped. "He doesn't stay long, so my evenings are his for now." It was an explanation, but also not. A line drawn with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to ask what that meant. Wanted to remind her of the bench, the question she whispered into the rain. But the words stuck, heavy, unsayable. On the walk home, I passed by her street without meaning to. The lights in her windows glowed faintly. A shadow moved inside. I stopped at the corner, hands in my pockets, half thinking I might knock, half hoping I wouldn't. I stood there too long, invisible in the dark. Then I turned back. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was late when I saw her again. Not at the bookstore. Not in passing. She was standing outside her porch light, fumbling with her keys. I had been walking back from the corner store, plastic bag in hand, not planning to see her at all. She glanced up when I stopped at the edge of her walkway. For a second, either of us moved. The distance felt too sharp, like the silence after a question you don't want to answer. "You've been gone," I said finally. Her shoulders shifted, a faint shrug. "My son's here. He leaves tomorrow." The words sat between us, not quite explanation, not quite excuse. She sighed and leaned against the doorframe, keys dangling loosely from her hand. "I didn't know how to be in both places," she said softly. "With him. With you. It felt wrong." I swallowed, the plastic bag crinkling in my grip. "And sitting on that bench didn't?" Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, then softened. She smiled, but it was tired. "Of course it did. That's the problem." The porch light buzzed overhead. A moth battered itself against the bulb, relentless. I wanted to step closer, but my feet stayed where they were, rooted in the damp grass. "I keep telling myself I'm too old for this," she murmured. "Too old for waiting by a phone, too old for—" She broke off, shaking her head. "And then you look at me like that, and I don't feel old at all. I just feel exposed." Her voice cracked a little on the last word. She looked away quickly, pressing her palm to the door like she needed the wood to hold her up. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "You think I don't feel it too? Every time I almost text you. Every time I stop myself from knocking on this door." The night was thick with it now. Neither of us pretending anymore. Just the raw edge of something that had been circling too long. I stepped forward then, slow, not closing the space fully, just enough so she could see I wasn't running. My hand lifted, then faltered before finally brushing the back of hers where it rested against the door. Light, tentative. She didn't move away. Her eyes met mine again, steady this time. No deflection. No jokes. Just the quiet acknowledgement of everything we hadn't said. "This isn't simple," she whispered. "I know." Her lips parted, as if to say more, but instead she let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. Our hands stayed there, touching just enough. "Okay," she said. It wasn't permission. It wasn't surrender. It was just the smallest opening, a word stretched between us like a fragile thread. And for the first time, it felt like enough. Weeks passed. The book club went on as always, but different somehow. I didn't watch the empty chair anymore. She was there, not every time, but enough. And when she was, the space between us felt less like a secret and more like a choice we'd both made. We never announced anything. There wasn't a line crossed, no sudden declaration. It was quieter than that. A walk after the meeting. A shared thermos of tea poured into mismatched mugs. Her son visiting again, this time with me helping carry boxes from the car. Mornings changed too. I'd see her sometimes at 8:47 a.m., leaving for work with her scarf tucked just so, glancing toward my window. I'd raise a hand without thinking, and she'd return it, a small wave, soft but steady. The bench in the park became ours, not every night, but often enough to call it familiar. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we sat in silence, listening to the gravel crunch under passing feet, the quiet hum of the streetlights. Once, I tried bringing coffee, but she wrinkled her nose and poured tea from her thermos instead. I didn't mind. Black coffee tasted different with chamomile chasing it down. She never stopped folding her scarf slowly, never stopped tracing the rim of her mug when she thought too long. I never stopped noticing. That noticing itself became its own kind of intimacy, a rhythm neither of us had to force. Life didn't turn perfect. Some nights she pulled away, tired or uncertain. Some days I doubted if what we had could stretch into years. But even then, there was something steady underneath. Not passion burning hot, not fireworks. Just warmth. Just enough. One night, as we left the bookstore, rain started again. Not heavy, just a drizzle, soft and constant. We paused under the awning like before. She looked at me, rain speckling her hair, and gave a small smile. "You still don't mind walking in it?" she asked. "Not if you're walking too." She laughed quietly, shaking her head, but she didn't move away. We stepped out together. Later, sitting on the bench, damp and shivering slightly, she pressed her shoulder into mine for warmth. No words. No explanation. Just presence. I thought about all the moments that brought us there, her hand brushing mine at the doorway, her voice on the porch admitting what she shouldn't have, the silence of an unsent message. And now, the simplest of things, two people, wet shoes, cooling tea, not needing anything more. I don't know if anyone else would understand why that night mattered, why that shoulder against mine carried more weight than 1,000 promises. But I know she did. And that was enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? Share your thoughts below. Your words might shape the next one.